everybody, welcome back to Off Meta Musings. I'm your host Aitan, and today I am coming back to you with another Gnarlwood Champion tournament report. We were back up at Warhammer World last week, again doing their Gnarlwood Rumble tournament pack. We had another 16 players, another 3 rounds, and yeah, we're going to go through it. I have Charles here with me today. Say hello, Charles.
Hi there.
Hello, hello, and yeah, let's get into it. So to start with, I wanted to talk about the terrain. Anyone who's seen my last video for the big event they did, we kind of have found out that Warhammer World, they love their dense terrain. It's something that they prefer. It's better from not from a narrative standpoint. I don't want to say that, but it just looks cooler playing on the better terrain. Yeah. So essentially, if you have dense terrain, monsters find a hard time to land places and to fit places. And also, if you have, there are a bunch of problems revolving around movement-free troops and how they're basically overtuned. So having more dense terrain really forces them to be able to get in and around.
It stops you just moving in straight lines a lot of the time and makes it so you've actually got to commit to going a certain direction.
Exactly, yeah, and it makes the movement stat very valuable, and it makes things like fly very valuable that fighters would otherwise really pay through the nose for. So if you think about a warband like Nighthaunt, where they're all essentially overcosted, your base dude is like 85 points for a chain rasp. He really pays for that movement 6 in his fly, but with terrain like this, it kind of makes
get a lot
sense.
of usage.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. So all the boards were like this. Like I said, we had 16 players, though interestingly, they told us that they sold like 30 odd tickets to the event. So I guess some people just couldn't turn up. So they had all the boards.
I mean,
set
the
up.
other thing is, the event is priced at £5. It's on a Thursday. It's on a Thursday evening, and it's only a 3-round short event.
Exactly.
So a lot of people have probably gone, you know what? I'll buy a ticket, and then as we are this close to Christmas, things probably come up, and they're like, well, I can't go.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But yeah, like I said, more terrain, more good.
Yeah. Unfortunately, to replicate this at home, you do essentially need like 2 sets of Warcry terrain, or a Warcry terrain and some Age of Sigmar terrain.
Yeah.
But it's not too difficult just to add a few more bits to a board just to break up a lot of the straight lines that you get.
Yes. I do think that this terrain, from what we've been talking to the TOs about, this is kind of going to be them playing up at Warhammer World. This is how they're going to run their Warcry events.
And most likely for Warhammer Fest, it's going to use this event pack and be this type of terrain most likely.
Exactly, yeah. So anyone who's going to Warhammer Fest, this is the kind of density that you're going to expect. So really, let's build towards that, not thinking that you'll just be able to move anyway.
Again, things may change if they end up selling so many tickets and they can't make super dense boards, but I think they want to try and keep boards dense to make it a more movement tactical game.
It's a bit of a pain for other TOs if they want to kind of replicate this, because they kind of need twice the amount of terrain.
Like I say, you essentially need 2 sets of Warcry starter box terrain to make one table.
Yes.
But it's the whole thing is it's a lots of bits of scatter terrain, which is what you can just use to just make little blocks and ways round.
Yeah, because otherwise you have to climb over everything if you don't want to walk over it, and it still eats up a couple of points of movement here and there, which does make a lot of difference, actually.
Yeah, I had that in my second game.
We'll come to that. That one's a surprise. So let's go on to the lists that we took. I've talked about this list, Counter Control, on the last video that I did, talking about damaging reactions and how you can list build for them. I'm going to put the link to that in the description below. But as a quick overview, essentially it's a core of Ossiarch Bone Reapers. So we've got the Hekatos and the 4 Mortek Guard, all super cheap, all with toughness 5, really geared towards using the reactions counter and deathly prowess, trying to maximize that. We've also got the Dreadblade Harrow out of Nighthaunt, who's specifically there to go and grab pieces of treasure for me and to go and get objectives, because everything else is movement 3 and the Dreadblade Harrow is movement 10, I think it was, and it's got the teleport attack, so we can go get treasure, go places,
and it's got fly,
and it's got fly.
It's an all-round good piece.
Exactly, it's a very versatile piece. It's a bit expensive, but I mean, you're you're paying for its abilities, and I like it in a list like. And then finally, we got 4 pieces of the Sons of Velmorn. We've got King Morlach, Sir Jedran, Helmar the Hewer, and Thane, fourth and last. They're mainly here kind of as support pieces. The 2 Grave Guards, so Helmar and Thane, they can pump out a lot of damage between the 2 of them. They have a double that if one attacks, the other one gets +2 attacks. Thane has a great weapon, so he can put some good damage on the board. Helmar is just versatile by himself. And then you've got the combo of King Morlach and Sir Jedran. Morlach is, I think he's very cheap for what he does. He just brings all-round solid stats to the battlefield. And then you've got Jedran, who has his famous double. If he's in range of Morlach, Morlach cannot get attacked. And that's, I found in my first game that we're going to go over, is really good for tying up avenues of attack. So if you squeeze him in between a wall and another piece of terrain, you can have Jedran sitting behind King Morlach. He pops his double, and effectively Morlach is immune to damage.
He becomes a wall.
He becomes a wall for that turn, but it's a wall that can attack you back, and that was a really important thing. So yeah, like I said, I built this specifically to see if reaction control would work with the toughness 5 guys, and yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. But we'll get onto that in a few minutes. So Charles, what did you bring?
So if you've listened to these before, I've been bringing the same thing, the Black Kings with a Varangard. I'm just trying to practice more and more with it, and every time I'm getting better and better with it, and it's just coming down to maybe just bad dice rolls in some games or just semi-bad matchups is now my biggest problem with it.
Yeah, it seems that your games are always really close.
Yeah, and this is the thing about it. The games are just getting to a point where it's the one thing one way is causing the issue, but the list itself is very solid. It's got a Varangard who is move 10. He's got 3/6 damage on his weapon with 3 attacks. He's got a double that can give him up to 3 additional attacks. So when he hits something, he can hit it really, really hard. He's got move 10. Yeah, he goes where he needs to be. In the treasure missions, he literally goes, you see that bit of treasure, it's mine, and murders anyone else who tries to take it from him. And the Blight Kings are just 25 wounds of toughness 4. They're just so much you got to chew through that generally I'm only losing 1 or 2 of them in a game because people have to dedicate so much just to kill one that it's like by turn 4, that's it. They don't have any more. They don't have any more stuff.
It's going to take a solid 2 rounds of combat just to kill one.
Yeah, and they're 2/4 damage apart from the ones with the toxins who are only 1/4, which is still really good damage. And there's strength 4, so they're all around averagely good, but just tough enough to take hits. And yeah, it's just really we'll go over it in the games. It's just more like if just one thing just goes slightly below average, it can turn the tide on them, and that's just their issue. Is as long as things go fine, you don't have a problem, or if the scenarios are in your favor, it's great.
Yeah, they don't have so much damage or so many attacks that they can kind of like weather whatever it is.
The Varangard has to pull a lot of weight, but he usually does. And it's if something bad happens and the Varangard gets taken out, I'm on the back foot, but it depends on how much it's done before then and what turn we're on.
Yeah, if it's like turn 3 and your Varangard dies, usually he's done his job.
Oh yeah, it's just a very solid list that can take most hits and just keep going.
Yeah. Yes. Right, so going into the games. So, like I said, we're playing from the Gnarlwood Rumble pack. This was recently actually released by Games Workshop. It's up on Warhammer Community. Again, I'll put the link down, so if anyone wants to play that particular mission pack, they can. This is designed to be played in around about an hour, so the idea is if you wanted to play a really quick event, 3 games of Warcry in an afternoon, for example, you could, using these missions. Personally, I think these missions are better balanced than the actual match play missions.
The major difference between these and the ones in the Warcry book are you only start with one of your 3 units on the board. And the other 2 both come in deployments, and the other 2 come on round 2. So your round 1 is generally very fast, and then your round 2 everything appears, and they generally appear on the opposite side of the board and behind your opponent's areas. So as we've found, slow movement isn't so much of a hindrance because where you appear actually really benefits.
Yeah, it's kind of where your opponent is, and that's where you want to be with your slow guys. But yeah, so round 1 was a season control. So season control, we've got the 4 victory points, four objectives even. If a player holds an objective, they get a point. If they hold all the objectives for a turn, they get 10 victory points. And after 4 battle rounds, whoever's got the most victory points is the winner. And we were also playing stolen wares. So what you would do is you would place 3 treasure tokens on the battlefield. Each treasure token is effectively worth 2 points at the end of the battle, and whoever has them scores those points. So it's a combination of getting objectives, catching treasure, holding on to the treasure, holding on to the objectives. My game 1 was against Layla Craven's Iron Golems that you can see here. I had the Sons of Velmorn, so all 4 of them in my shield. They deploy on the battlefield on this particular map, so I had them from turn 1. So I effectively split them into 2. I ran Morlach and Jedron because they kind of come as a pair towards the right-hand objective, and I ran the 2 Graveguard to the left-hand objective. My opponent's dagger had the ogre, so it was actually off the battlefield for a turn. And on the board that we were playing, there was a bunch of terrain kind of around the right-hand side, kind of protecting the right-hand objective. So there was like a wall and a small piece of scatter. So I did exactly the thing that we were talking about before. I plugged the gap with King Morlach. I shoved Jedron behind him, and I was like, okay, Jedron, keep me alive. So it forced him at one point to climb up and over the terrain, which just chewed up so much movement. I think it was the ogre who did this, didn't have the ability to get anywhere meaningful, which was pretty good. It really worked. My Mortek Guard mostly were in my hammer and dagger, so they came on behind my opponent and on the left-hand side. They had the toughness 5, they had the 10 wounds. Against the normal Iron Golems, they're only hitting me with strength 4, so I did a lot of counter in this game. At one point, I even managed to pull off the Bone Reaper reaction. So the Bone Reaper reaction is if your opponent misses all of their attacks, you can do 5 damage back. And after, I think it was 2 turns of counters, I pulled that off, and then suddenly Iron Golems were just dropping like flies, really, which is pretty fun. It kind of worked. I wasn't convinced it would work, but it worked.
That's the thing. Their toughness at that point, when you're countering, it doesn't matter how tough they are, because when your toughness 5, is it 5 on your
66% of their attacks are just
and they're just hitting themselves, and you're like, well, I don't actually have to roll my attacks on you. You're just going to injure yourself enough.
Exactly, yeah. I had the Dreadblade Harrow kind of tie up my opponent's leader for 2 turns because he's got the 25 wounds and he can just kind of sit there and not really go anywhere. The leader's got a lot of damage, but not enough that it can one-shot a Dreadblade. And yeah, so I just had more guys around, and by turn 3 I actually captured all of the objectives, managed to score the full 10 points for that turn. So once you do that, it's kind of very difficult.
Yeah, that kind of, unless your opponent flips it all on the final round,
exactly,
you've probably won.
King Morlach had an amazing round of combat against the ogre. He managed to roll 3 crits and 1 hit for 17 damage.
Yeah, that's good night.
Almost one-shotted the ogre, and yeah. So after all of that, I ended on 18 victory points, and I managed to win the game, and it was pretty good. Counter seemed to work in that game.
Yeah, because again, when they're lower strength than your toughness, it does kind of work a lot in your favor, and you're probably not you're also either equal or lower than their toughness, so countering really makes sense in that situation.
Exactly, and Mortek Guard don't do any damage, so might as well just counter. Anyway, who did you play, Charles?
It was a mixed bag of Soul-Blight Gravelords. He had a couple of Graveguard in there, and
Graveguard Skeletons, and
Graveguard Skeletons and a couple of zombies, and a Necromancer as his leader, which was interesting. And yeah, unfortunately, it ended in a loss to me just because I started with only 2, because I've only got 7 models in the Warband. I'm already at like a 3 model disadvantage. I think he's had 10. I started with only 2 models on the board in my shield. So they basically, when we deployed the treasure, he deployed 1 on his side. I deployed 1 near the objective on my side, and then he was kind of forced to deploy the other one kind of towards the center, but again, near my other side objective. So my first turn, both of my guys moved forward towards the treasure, picked up the treasure, and then moved back towards the objectives to hold them. But he managed to send one of his guys running round to counter one of my objectives, essentially, and hold 2 of hold 2 of his. So it was I was already on the back foot on the first
Yeah, so
round
it's a 3
with
to
him
1
having
already
2 and
with
me
you
only
at
him.
1.
Well, it was 2 to 1
2 to
because it
1.
was
Sure.
the other one was contested.
Ah.
So it was one of those ones of like, okay, right, I'm on the back foot a bit. Then when our reinforcements came in, the Varangard just had the worst luck he could possibly have. I got a quad. I got a quintuple roll in my turn, so I rolled 5 5s
Nice.
and a single. And it's like, okay, well, I would have really liked
Penta-roll.
it to just. Yeah, I would have really liked it to not be 5 of the same dice
Sure.
because that 5th dice is just wasted.
Yeah.
It becomes a 5 dice quad. But the Vanguard had got charged by a skeleton, so it'd come on behind one of his objectives. He basically moved the skeleton into the Varangard. It's like, okay, Varangard in 1 attack, maybe 2, should be able to kill it, and then I
Skeleton's
can
got 8
use the
wounds, right?
quad.
It should be fine.
Yeah, I've got the quad, and I should then just be able to zoom out with the quad and into somebody else. Yeah, the Varangard basically rolled. His first roll, it was, I think, 3 1s and a 2. His second attack, again, was like a bunch of 2s and 1 hit. So I'd done 6 wounds to the skeleton. It's like, oh, the skeleton's still alive. It's like, well, I'm not going to waste the quad on that.
Yeah, because you don't get the extra move after. It's a move
Yeah,
and an
exactly.
attack,
It's a move then an attack. So it was like, well, I'm not going to waste the quad killing a skeleton.
Sure.
And at that point, his guys who came on behind where my shield started, they flooded the one that was contested, whereas my guys came on from the dagger side. I sent one from the dagger and one from the hammer towards his objective by the shield. The other one intercepted the guys going for my second objective. So I managed to kind of hold mine, overpower one of his, and bring it to 2-2 because he then moved up towards the objective on my side. So it's kind of like
so many guys,
he's
right,
he's still up one objective, and he managed to then also bring down my Blight King who had one of my 2 treasures. So in turn 3, he stole that treasure and picked it up. And then turn 3, Varangard actually managed to do things, and he moved up, killed stuff, moved on to his objective in the top corner. But by that point, I'm just getting overwhelmed by bodies.
Yeah.
So my Varangard still couldn't take the objective because he had 2 guys to my 1. He had 2 on his guy, and then at this point it's still 2-2. But he's up 1 point already, and he's now got 2 treasures to 1. And that's just kind of how it went into the final round. He'd managed to just overload the one objective I did have on my side of the board. So I ended up only holding 1 on the final turn because he brought 1 guy back, moved guys in just to flip it over. So it ended being he had 2, 1 was being contested, and I had 1.
Yep.
And then he got another 4 points from treasure to my 2. So it ended up something like, what was it, 60? It was like 12-10 or something, like 11-9. It was a relatively close game, and like if the Vanguard had just rolled
did his job.
Average on his, if he just rolled average on his dice,
yeah, I think he's got
would have
average like 7 damage or something on his base dice.
If I got 1 hit and 1 crit, it would have just instantly murdered it.
Yes.
If I'd rolled 3 hits, which on 3s, on 3 dice, good chance, and he would have just murdered it. He was then gonna rampage into somebody, murder them, and like he was just gonna clear up his flank.
Yes.
But against the skeleton, he just kind of went, really don't feel it today.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem with Soul Black Gravelords, right? You have to kill a lot of them in 1 turn.
Well, that's the thing. I killed in the game. I think I killed 5 models, and he brought 2 back. So I didn't have too much of an issue killing because like I could kill the zombies pretty easily. I could kill the skeletons, and I killed the Vanguard when he did attack. He just kind of walked up to the back of the vampire lady and just kind of stabbed her through the spine, and she crumpled. So when he did his job, he did his job. But like I've said, the issue with the warband I'm having is when the dice just roll below average.
Yeah.
And then you just don't have that damage there. It was a close loss, and that was it. It was just like one thing went wrong, and it just kind of started to spiral. But it wasn't too bad. I got a lot of kill points. He didn't. He killed like 1 Blight King, I think it was, or 2.
Each Blight King is 25 wounds worth of walls.
Exactly. Yeah, it was just like it took forever, but it was not a bad game.
Yeah. Okay, good. Game 2, then, in that case, was Spoils of War. So Spoils of War is the 4 objectives. It's the one where you gain points per turn for capturing the objectives, and for an action, if you hold an objective, you can raise it for an extra 2 victory points, and then at the end of the game, whoever has the most points wins. And we were playing that in combination with Strong Arm, the competition. So at the end of each battle round, you count up the number of wounds within 3 inches, I think? Yeah, 3 inches of the center of the battlefield, and whoever has the most wounds scores an additional 3 victory points. games. My game 2 was actually against the same Soulblight Gravelord guy that Charles fought in game 1. I've actually got his list here now. There was a Necromancer, a Vargoyle, a couple of Graveguard with great weapons, skeletons, and zombies, effectively. And along with the running vampire.
Yeah.
So it was pretty evenly matched, right? Because I'm playing an undead faction with good toughness. He's playing an undead faction with decent damage. So we were kind of equal each other out. I think that the Vargoyle gave my opponent a small edge because it's much faster than anything that I have on the
Move
field.
8 with fly.
Exactly,
so
yeah. So the only thing I've got is like the Dreadblade Harrow, but that was kind of tied up doing other things. And it's got generally better damage to my units than my Dreadblade can put out. So it basically consisted of me drip feeding him the Vargoyle Mortek Guard, like one every turn, effectively, to keep it pinned in place, and also just piling fighters onto the center of the battlefield just to try and get the second. There was a lot of leaving Graveguard on 1 or 2 wounds intentionally there, because I don't have the massive damage output where I can just flatten a bunch of Graveguard in one turn. I can effectively kill 1, maybe 2 a turn. But if I did that, all he would do is just use his triples, bring him back to life, and I'd have problems. So, yeah, there was a lot of leaving them on 1 or 2 wounds, and then on, like, the third turn, just going, okay, let's turn counter on now.
Yeah, you kill, like, 3 of them in one turn, and
Exactly.
suddenly, well, that's 2 of them out of the game now.
Exactly, yeah. So, but overall, I did lose. I lost 18 points to 20, so it was super close. And I think it strung on the competition that we're going to talk about in a minute that actually swung it. But we'll talk about that after Charles's game.
So I played Jez Bickham, and he was using the new Jade Obelisk,
Yep.
and
Here they are,
he'd
so nice
painted them in
picture.
actually in amber, which was actually quite a nice difference.
Yep.
So yeah, he had 2 of the pick guys, 1 of the hammer guys, 3 of the basic guys with just the mason's tools.
Yes. So no bows.
And then he had no bows, and then they had the obelisk and the witch,
Bird also.
and 1 bird, which it didn't do a lot, but it's there for some moral support. But yeah, this was one where me and Itan have like 3 crafted on Jade Obelisk, and they've got a lot of potential because they are really glass cannons. They have a lot of damage. They've got a decent defense, but they don't have many wounds to back it up.
I think you need 2 boxes, to be honest, to make a really good Jade Obelisk.
Like basically taking like 6, like a combination of hammers and picks in about 6 of them, just for their sheer efficiency.
Yeah. And the Obelisk,
but
dude as well is only like 110 points with 20 wounds.
Yeah,
so he's super good.
But in this one, so he had 1 pick guy and 2 of the normal guys on the board. I had the Varangard and 1 Blight King on the board. And in my first roll, I rolled a quad.
Oh, nice.
So what the Varangard did is he started in my hammer near my center objective at the bottom. And it was like, there's no point me just moving over here. What I'm going to do is going to run past his guys to get within range of the objective while also being within range of the middle of the board, and then murder one of his guys.
Yeah.
And I did manage to kill his pick guy, who only has, I think it's 12 wounds, but it took me 3 attacks to do it. Because again, he just rolled I'd rolled like 1 hit or 2 hits, and then the next one would roll nothing. And then I think it was the final roll, I rolled like 2 crits and a hit. And it's like, well, massive overkill. But because I was hoping to go over there with a quad, hopefully murder the pick guy with 2 attacks, and then kill one of the basic guys with the last attack, and just really solidify that attack. But that wasn't to be. Whereas my other one just went and took my objective on my center line. So he moved. What he actually did is he moved his other guy to take his objective. So he had 2 to my 1 on his objective. So which actually worked against him, because it meant he missed out one of his objectives on his first turn.
Right.
So we both only had 1 objective, but he could have had 1 contested one,
sure,
and then had that objective to burn on turn 2.
Yes.
Basically, the bulk of his force came on from the shield, which was the priestess, the obelisk bearer, another guy with a pick, and he used their quad ability, which is he moved the pick guy up first into contact with the Varangard. And then the obelisk bearer has a quad where, based on the value of the quad, is the range, and you can give a model within that range 2 attacks, moves, or ability, essentially 2 actions.
Not bad.
And after he moved up and hit the Varangard once, he then activated that guy and then murdered the Varangard with 2 more attacks.
Yeah.
Because the hammer is 2/5 damage.
Yeah, it's very good.
It hits very hard, and he just rolled hot on it. And yeah, Varangard crumpled in turn 2, and it's like, well, That's not going to plan. But by this point, I'd secured the middle of the board on the first turn, and I essentially just moved everything towards the middle of the board. And my guys having 25 wounds each meant I could just flood the middle and hold it.
Yeah.
So I burned the objective I held on turn 1 on turn 2, because you can't burn them on turn 1. So that put me up on points. And essentially, we both scored 6 from the primary, because we both held 2 for 2 turns, and we both burned them for 2 turns. And then it just came down to the holding the middle. And what it was is I just was having to climb over walls to get my Blight Kings within range of the middle, because this is where the dense terrain actually worked against me. In the final round of the game, I ended up having 80 wounds in the middle, and I think the most he could get to was something like 72, even if he threw everyone within 3 of the middle. So it was, he scored 9 and I scored 15, I think it is.
Nice. You
9.
won that one then.
Yeah, and I won that one, but it was all, this one was all on the secondary.
That's a problem that I have with this secondary specifically. I've actually written to Games Workshop about
Yeah.
it. I don't think that this pack should have any secondaries that can potentially score more than your primaries per turn.
Yeah,
I think
the only way to store more primary on this one is to hold the objective for 3 turns and then burn it on the last turn. But then you risk not having it on that last turn if you, say, lose it on turn 3.
Exactly. You need to hold all of the objectives just to outscore the secondary. Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of fine, but I wouldn't see it score 3 victory points. I think
if it only scored 1 or 2,
I think 2 is fine.
Because what it'll do is it's just enough to tick up points to equal an objective.
Yeah.
3 is very high on it, but it's what won me the game.
Exactly. So going into round 3, we played Tides of Battle. Tides of Battle is effectively, 6 objectives?
6, yeah.
And the person who does not have the initiative chooses one of the objectives. That becomes primary objective for that turn. The primary objective is worth 2 points, and the secondary objectives are worth 1 apiece. You get points at the end of each battle round for how many objectives you have, and at the end of the battle, you score however many points, whoever got the most points.
It's whoever scores the most wins.
And we were playing Conquering the Land, so we get 1 victory point for each quarter of the battlefield that has 1 or more friendly fighters.
Wholly within is the important part. Yeah.
And I played against Tom Hill's Ogres here. You can't see it. There is a Nobbler in there, so it's like 2 Iron Guts, normal guy, whatever the character was, a
Tyrant,
and a Nobbler. Effectively, because it's a 5-man warband, I had the massive numbers advantage. I'm running 10. I also had the Dreadblade Harrow, effectively to just teleport around the battlefield, getting objectives. Now, I didn't kill a single ogre. I mean, I couldn't kill a single ogre.
I mean, they're like 32 wounds, I think they are.
Whatever it is. But I basically won the fight by throwing Mortek Guard at him, slowing him down, and darting about the place, racking up actual victory points.
Yeah, if you just hold more objectives.
Yeah, there wasn't anything super special about what I did. It's just because I started on 10 and he only had 5. It was something easy that I could do. And that was that.
Well, I had Derek's Flesh Eaters, and it has the Terrorgeist.
Yep.
It does also have a Vargulf, and then I think it was like just 1 ghoul leader and like 4 more ghouls or 5 ghouls. So it's a very compact warband because it has a Terrorgeist. But unfortunately, the way the board was set up, the dense terrain basically killed the Terrorgeist because it came on from the shield, and it technically couldn't actually fit on the board, but we were like, well, just because it was only overhanging by like about 5 millimeters off the edge. But it was like, well, it's fine. It can come on there. It's fine. It literally got 1 move into the board, and then it couldn't actually reach anywhere else on the board to land. So it was kind of stuck where it was. But it was between. So looking at the map on the top left side where the hammer is, it was kind of semi between the 2 objectives, but not close enough to the top one. But it was like towards the middle.
Okay, so it wasn't close enough to capture anything.
It wasn't close enough, but the other problem it had was it was straddling the middle line, so it wasn't in either. It couldn't, because the way the terrain was, it couldn't fit where it had to fit. It was straddling the line, so it couldn't be in either quarter.
Sure, I get you. So it basically couldn't score any points.
It couldn't score, but it basically sat there and it used Dragon Maul a lot to move my guys around and do damage.
Yep.
I had on the board, I had 3 models. So I had my Blight King leader, a Bell, and a normal Blight King. And essentially on my first turn, I sent 1 towards each of the middle objectives and 1 off to the side one by the shield side.
Yeah.
because it was heavily defended by terrain. I knew I wasn't going to be won by the hammer because his stuff was just going to come on there, and one Blight King isn't going to hold an objective. So he waddled off to the left, took the objective on the left. So I had 3 objectives, but only 2 table quarters. Whereas he had 3 models on the he had 3 models on the board to begin with. And again, he split them out, one to each of his top objectives, and then pushed one into my half of the board. One of them was the Vargulf. So it leapt onto my left side and leapt over the board and contested that one. But it was a kind of even game to begin with, because I was going second, so I chose the one in the bottom corner to be my primary objective. So I actually only held one of them on turn 1, but it was a primary. Whereas he held 2 on turn 1.
Sure, so you scored evens.
So we scored even turn 1, and that's kind of how the game went. We kind of were holding even points between us because we were switching who had primary, and we both held primary for 2 turns. But like I say, the Terrorgeist come in on the shield. My Varangard came in on the hammer, and it basically did a massive loop around the board. So it went along the top edge of the board, killing his one model that was on that top objective. And then it ran down the middle into the Terrorgeist after 2 Blight Kings had also been stuck with it. And when it charged the first time, it did something like, I think I got 2 crits on it. And that was instantly just 12 wounds off of it.
Yeah, so you bracketed the Terrorgeist out of 1.
Yeah, just like 1 hit, did a bracket.
Yeah.
And then in the next round, I got to go first, and I used the Varangard's double to give it another 3 attacks. So it had 6 attacks. And the Terrorgeist is only toughness 4, and the Vanguard's toughness strength 5. And it did I think it got like 4 hits and a crit, so it just knocked like another 18 wounds off of it. And suddenly the Terrorgeist was down to like 10 wounds, and it was like, I can murder this thing.
Suddenly looking very mortal indeed.
He was quite worried because if it goes down, he was gonna basically lose control of like at least one objective. He was using Dragon Maul, and like he Dragon Maul the Vanguard away from the middle objective behind me.
That's an interesting thing about that, right? Because he's using Dragon Maul, he's not using the Vargulf's attack boosting ability.
Well, that was the thing. He was having to use it to move my guys around.
Yeah.
And like his Vargulf abandoned the objective to go after my one objective in the bottom corner.
Sure.
But the problem is you have to have more models to take control of it.
Yeah.
So my one Blight King sat there going, "Oh, you're going to attack me. I'll just use my reaction for -1 damage from your hits." And just one Blight King just sit there and went, "Okay, punch me, Vargulf. You're not going to do enough damage to kill me."
Oh yeah, it takes a Vargulf at least 2 turns to kill a Blight King.
And it didn't. Again, he had really poor dice rolls, but then I suffered again poor dice rolls attacking his Terrorgeist, and I got it to 6 wounds.
Oh, that's a shame.
But it was that point I'd managed to take. I had models in all 4 quarters every turn from turn 2, whereas he only had 3 quarters. He was gaining a point every turn, and then I think in turn 4, I knocked him out of the other top quarter he had, so he only got 2 quarters, and it actually ended a draw.
Oh, nice. Cool.
When we totaled up the points, because he'd got like an extra quarter on the first turn, and then I got an extra quarter on the last turn, we'd actually got a 25-25 draw.
Wow. So if Vanguard did its job...
If the Terrorgeist had died in that final round, I would have scored us another objective, because we were contesting objectives a lot rather than holding them. So we weren't scoring a lot from the objectives, but we were scoring like 3 points a turn from them. The problem is 2 of his models are quite difficult to deal with, and like I say, the Dragon Maul was what he was having to use to get my guys away from objectives. And yeah, if I had one Blight King who, if he just rolled over 9 dice, if he just rolled over 8 dice, if he'd rolled the 4 hits on 8 dice or 2 crits, would have killed the Terrorgeist. So like a 50-50,
right?
yeah, it was a 50-50 shot on 8 dice, and I could have killed the Terrorgeist, and he just fluffed, and it was like, oh well,
next time,
there goes me killing the Terrorgeist.
Next time,
yeah. But if I'd killed the Terrorgeist, I would have had another guy who was free to move to the center objective, which would have scored me 1 more point, and it would have been a win rather than a draw. But it was one of those games where, again, just averages, just getting below average, stopped the win. But other than that, it was a fine game. Didn't really do anything wrong, and what really beat the game for him was the Terrorgeist just not being able to go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Which
Like,
that's it. That's the whole point of the terrain. That's why they did it.
yeah. But if he hadn't bought Terrorgeist, he could have had so much more
Oh,
stuff
he could
and
have had
just
like
flooded the board.
another Vargulf. He could have had
But
like another
he
full
wants
version.
to use his Terrorgeist. So
That's true.
like, and if the board had been a normal terrain density board, it could have just leapt around jumping on people. But again, the Blight Kings are tough enough that even a relatively full power Terrorgeist isn't gonna kill him in one go.
No,
And that was his
not one
problem.
attack,
Like,
actually.
he couldn't actually kill the Blight Kings with the Terrorgeist.
Well,
And
by the end, wasn't he
after the
doing like
well,
1 or 2 damage?
well, yeah,
or
he was
something?
at the end. He was on 1-2 damage for his profile, so he couldn't actually kill anyone. But yeah, if he had been moving around, he would have left the Vanguard open.
Yes.
Like if we were playing on a normal board, he would have left the Vanguard open. The Vanguard would have just gone, okay, I'm just going to follow you, and I'm just going to stab you again.
I'm coming for you,
Because again, the Vanguard is toughness 6, and the Terrorgeist is only strength 5, so he was wounding me on 5, so he couldn't kill the Vanguard. So monsters are still very strong, but the way they've done the boards really harms you bringing a monster, because like after his first move, we realized he couldn't move anywhere else on the board because he physically couldn't get the model to go there. And that one, yeah, ended in a draw, so
very good. All
it was
right,
a
so
solid game.
who won, Charles?
This, yeah, which I was surprised. Like I saw it in the cabinet. I was like, okay, Lumineth. I was like, okay, interesting.
That's
And then it's like, oh, it won. It's like, oh, and yeah, you look at it and
to look
go,
this up because
what is it?
I had no clue what Lumineth do because I'd never looked at them. So effectively, a Lord Regent, some Sentinels, and a lot of Wardens. Now, neither Wardens nor the Sentinels are all that good in terms of stats. They got movement 5, which is fine. They got toughness 4, which is fine. They got a basic 3 attacks, 1/3 damage, strength 3, which is
It's
okay.
1/4 actually on the Spearman.
Okay,
yeah, the Spearman 1/4. So it's actually like when they crit, very good.
It's okay. It's still 3 attacks, right? So you need to use doubles.
Yeah, it's only 3 attacks. It's only strength 3, but it does have a 3-inch range.
Yeah, and the Lord Regent,
huge.
It's the Lord Regent is also fine. He's okay, right? He's 235 points. He can fight. The basic guys can kind of fight. There aren't many of them. But what they have going for them is their double.
A fight can only use the ability if there are 2 or more other friendly fighters within an inch of the fighter.
Yeah, so they kind of work in blocks.
Yeah, and then until the end of the round, 1 from the attack characteristic to a minimum 1 of attack actions made by enemy fighters while they target a fighter within 1 of this fighter.
Exactly.
Only have to do it within 1 of every 3 of them.
Yeah, so they only have 8 wounds, but combine that minus 1 attack with the toughness 4, and suddenly
if you're a 3 attack strength 3 guy or a 3 attack strength 4 guy, and you go down to 2 attacks,
you're not killing them.
1 of them's only going to hit, really.
Exactly.
So suddenly 8 wounds goes twice. It's almost like can almost be 16 wounds equivalent.
Yeah.
At that point.
And there are what 12 models in the warband, so he's got 3 groups of 4 that he's deploying.
Which I'm assuming it's 3 wardens, like 3 wardens are bowmen, 3 wardens are bowmen, and 3 wardens are the Regent.
Horsemen.
Just because one spearman goes, I'm going to activate this ability. We all move up together.
Yes.
And then there's suddenly a wall of, well, you can't really hurt any of them.
Wall of spears. But yeah, it's just they have a lot of guys. They're fairly tanky with their doubles and the toughness, and that just makes them really good in treasure missions and in objective missions. And they do just enough damage.
12 models. Yeah. But also, just 12 models is just enough. It's more activations than most lists have, so you can burn a couple of early activations just going, well, this guy's just going to move here.
For sure, yeah, and it's good. I'm actually really pleased that something like this won because it's not something I've seen before. I haven't run that many. We've run like 4 events now so far, but I've never seen anything like this, and that was pretty nice. I quite liked it actually. But yeah, so going on to the last thing. This is. You can pause this and look into it. This is the standings of everybody. For these Gnarlwood Rumbles, Games Workshop does record what factions people were playing, so I kind of had to fill this in as much as I could.
They just record the Grand Alliance because you get an award for the Grand Alliance, like top of the Grand Alliance.
Exactly, yeah. So I've tried to fill this in as best I can. There are still a few holes, but it gives you a good idea of where people came. So yeah, first place we had the Lumineth, second place Legions of Chaos, which was interesting. I came third with the quote-unquote Ossiarch Bone Reapers, a couple of Soulblight Grave Lords. Because of the terrain, the Zombie Dragon came 8th. you can see how that went. Charles, you came 9th, and it was
Ninth, yeah.
Hunters of Huanchi. They turned up. It was
Which is
straight
good.
out of the box Hunters of Huanchi, so it was in no way optimized. So lots of skinks with blowpipes that we all hate because they're not that good.
The really interesting thing with it is if you look at it, he scored almost zero kill points.
Yeah.
But in the final game, scored 38 victory points.
Yeah, because there's a lot of
So
objectives.
you don't
final
have
game.
to kill to win.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it. I didn't kill.
Same with your game. Yeah, you didn't kill a single ogre, but you scored 30 points.
You could win. Yeah, so that's something interesting. I'm delving into Hunters of Wenchi at the moment, and that's something that I want to kind of explore a bit to see how they can kind of win these games by using mobility and just like jumping around the place as opposed to straight killingness. I think that's going to be really interesting.
You've got to play them, what we say, with finesse rather than going, how am I going to remove opponents' models? It's more like, how am I going to negate opponents' models?
But I think if I can get the reps in, I reckon they could be pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, then we got Iron Golems in 12. Fang was in there, so that's probably what came in 13th. Then the last Soul Black Gravelord player, Jade Obelisk, and Stormcast in last place. But yeah, overall, it was pretty good. I really enjoyed the event. I always enjoy these events. I always think that the competition is really good, and regardless of what warband people are bringing, it's always a good game. There's never a game.
We're seeing different warbands is the thing. We're seeing different concepts. Like the Lumineth is completely out of left field. It's like
we're seeing
it's a Lumineth spear block.
Different winners every month.
It's not always the same thing winning.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I'll go to a lot more of these. I hope, as long as they keep running them. There's another one coming up in January that we're going to look at. But Charles, have you got any thoughts about the Nurgle guys that you're using? Because I've been thinking about what you were saying about if the numbers don't go your way, the game kind of falls apart, and you kind of just get
that's the only problem. There's no way to buff the numbers is the problem. Like we've theoried that I can lose 3 guys.
Yeah.
Add in either like a Mindstealer Spheranx, Varangar, a Plaguebearer champion, essentially. Yeah, but I'm losing 3 Blight Kings for 2 other models.
Sure, yeah. Because Blight Kings are kind of too cheap that they don't make up a good chunk of points by getting rid of 2 of them.
Yeah, that's the problem. You don't actually lose a huge amount of points for dropping a guy, and the only way to get things that are stronger than them are dropping 3 guys essentially to get 2 back in.
To become Rotbringers at that point, it's just whatever you ally. Maybe it's time to start looking at some of the Skaven characters because they do all have lead from the back, which is a massive like injection of attacks for you. Which might be, and they're not super expensive. So if you can like get rid of a Bell for one of the cheaper Skaven characters, maybe that'll work. And he kind of piggybacks one of your deployment groups.
Or maybe look at other warbands. It's just getting a warband to run essentially.
Yeah, exactly. We only really get to play once a month anyway.
So minimal investment. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, right. And then from my side, counter control worked most of the time. I was playing against 4 guys, apart from the ogres, of course. Yeah, I was most of the time playing against strength 4, so I had the toughness 5, so my guys didn't die, and I could just counter my way to win. I'm really happy that kind of works, and I've got that out of my system now, and I don't need to test that anymore.
The theory is sound. It does really come down to who you face.
Exactly, yeah. And like I said, I'll put the link in the description below. I've got a whole video on counter control, how it works, what you would want to bring. Not just for Bone Reapers. I give a bunch of different options. I've got Splintered Fang in there. I've got the Fire Slayers in there. Just theory hammering a bunch of lists, and it's quite interesting, I thought. But yeah, that's it, really, Charles. Unless do you have anything you want to end on?
No, it's just it's a good event. More terrain does seem to make a better Warcry game, and I think again because you've got to actually really more commit your strategy in your early turns. Well, I'm just going to run straight across the board. So yeah, if you're going to play Warcry, maybe try and add a few more bits of scatter terrain if you have them. Just see about playing with a little bit more terrain.
Sure. Okay. Good stuff then. So in that case, I think we will end there. As always, if you like the content that I'm putting out, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And let us know what you think about these events, about the Gnarlwood Rumble tournament pack, because that is out in the wild now, about any improvements you think we could make to our lists, anything you want, please put it down, and yeah, we'll be happy to reply. And so yeah, that's it really. So thank you from me. Thank you very much, Charles.
Thank you.
And yeah, I will see you next time.